That's what we're really obsessed with in every direction, right? From domains, what exists and who registered them and what the configurations are, to their DNS records, to the IP addresses and who owns those, right? So we really index a ton of data. And, if it's a needle in the haystack game, we're kind of a haystack factory.
Welcome to the Head of the Breach podcast, where we talk everything offensive security. I'm your host, Casey Camilleri. And today I'm here with Alex Ronquillo.
Hi.
Alex leads product revenue at WhoisXML API, the internet data company trusted by over 700 cybersecurity vendors to fuel their threat intelligence and vulnerability discoveries. WhoisXML has been helping garage-built MVPs to massive IPO stage companies with their data intelligence and scanning. Alex has seen what's worked and what breaks is when products meet attacker reality and product meets market. Alex, thanks for coming on to the Head of the Breach podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So we're filming here live at RSA, and what keeps you coming back to RSA?
Love the community. Very tight-knit. I think I've been coming for 6 years now, and every year I come home with, I don't know, like a lot of business cards and swag and shirts and stuff, but also, some of the relationships I built in RSA 2020, have come to fruition to like big partnerships and to big things.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Have you seen anything interesting on the floor?
We got goats. Someone's got goats out there today. I heard there's like some therapy dogs, really cool stuff. I haven't seen an F1 car yet, but I bet someone's got something.
Well, it's goats now, right?
Yeah.
F1 car.
Yeah, I like it.
A lot of crazy stuff out there, a lot of crazy marketing, but that's cool. Why is WHOIS data important?
Well, figuring out who is behind domains, IP addresses, right, is a little bit of kind of like a bedrock of security, trying to get a sense of identifying what's on the other side of a connection, right? Whether that's like a domain coming in from like an email system, or whether that's like a subdomain that maybe one of your customers has, and you're trying to get a sense of, who owns this? How long has it been around? Those types of things. It's been pretty important to contextualize, I think, for a long time, whose assets are what.
And how is it used from a cybersecurity perspective?
Today, WHOIS data is installed into a lot of different products, platforms. Primarily, I think the main use case these days is like the age of domains, right? Trying to get a sense of, for example, millions of emails coming through different email security software. Those domains from those emails, how many of them are just created yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think there's a lot of good research from people like Palo Alto, things like that state the majority, really, of domains that are newly created tend to have kind of like malicious properties, or they're used for phishing or, general spam kind of badness.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of these cybersecurity products and solutions have been basically saying, hey, has it been created within the 30 days? If so, just drop it, just ignore it, or at least uptick it quite a bit that it could possibly be malicious.
Right.
I know from our perspective, being, in the offensive side and pen testing side, that we have to now age things because of that reason, right? You have to purchase a domain and you have to, age it, prime it, whatever you want to call it, bake it, and get it all set up just so it doesn't appear like the new kid on the street, because like you said, it can be triggered as or treated as malicious.
Yeah. Sometimes that's as much as 3 months even.
Okay.
So a lot of the people who are, thinking about starting new businesses, new websites, things like that, a lot of times you're, email marketing people even if they don't have a knowledge of cybersecurity, even they know, oh, hey, you should probably register that domain, at least a few months before
you go to market.
Yeah.
So it can backfire at you. So talk to me, like, how should I use WHOIS data if I am, say, a penetration tester or security consultant, and I am looking to basically embed this information or data in my, say, OSINT or reconnaissance phases of testing?
Yeah, so it's going to be hit and miss because, when it comes to especially smaller organizations, a lot of those organizations keep like a private WHOIS record, right? Yeah. So they may not have like a registrant email that you can pivot off, stuff like that. But in larger companies' cases, like let's say Wells Fargo as an example, they generally want people to know who they are and what websites they operate.
Yeah, right? And who they partner with, right?
Right.
Even acquisitions and things like that, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of their domain infrastructure is on like very reputable registrar like MarkMonitor, right? Yeah. So as a penetration tester, I might say, hey, WellsFargo.com is sitting on MarkMonitor. right? It has these particular name servers, which you can find from the WHOIS data. And also they have a registrant email that they use pretty consistently. So if I have access to like a reverse lookup service, right, which isn't like a natural function of the WHOIS world, but it's a lot of places like us to kind of do like reverse WHOIS check and say, where else have we seen Wells Fargo register with this email, or even just their brand name? And then you'll find there's thousands of domains that they've registered. So again, if you're, thinking about pen testing, like one of those first steps is, what are the things we're going to test?
Yeah.
Right. And also, are those really owned by the target that maybe I'm on contract to, or am I going to accidentally pen test, someone else's domains that are not even, my targets?
Right.
Maybe even get in some trouble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As a tester, that's the number one thing that I always use the WHOIS data for, mostly for the reverse, to do the further reconnaissance, to discover the things I didn't know about. And I'd say email is probably the number one that, thing that I'm going to use, or most prevalent one that I'm going to use, because it's most accurate too.
Yeah.
Right? If you find an email, you do the reverse lookup, you get all the different, domains that are registered that I didn't know about, right? So you that's a great first step. And then the second step that I'm using is everything else. Can I use the org name? Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't, right? It depends on how unique it is. And then it goes into, name servers, but sometimes that's less likely to happen nowadays, right?
Yeah, I think especially in these days, everyone's building everything in cloud and on top of other services and stuff, right? So I think majority of companies, unless they're really big, generally don't operate their own name service. They're using like a Cloudflare or something from their hosting company, right? Which has a lot of benefits to it. But again, from the pen testing side, right, that gives us a lot more work now, because you can't just reverse a Cloudflare name server. You're going to have millions of domains that have nothing to do with your target organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where, I think a lot of the other open source intelligence from like SSL certificates, DNS infrastructure, IP address, and its hosting, that type of stuff starts to kind of give you a better, I guess, cohesive picture. But there's definitely still a lot of, I think, I don't know, it's still kind of part art, part science, right? Like you mentioned, sometimes you can pivot on just an org name with no email. Other times you're going to find... Yeah, I mean, criminals can go register something from Malaysia and just say that it's Wells Fargo organization, and then,
Right.
yeah, and then leave no email. And it's like, well, is it or not?
Yeah, and that's why those different attributes or the different fields of the record have kind of different weights, right, or different confidence levels.
Exactly. And that's where, we love doing a lot of work with folks who build attack surface, third-party risk applications. I think everyone kind of needs a lot of the same ingredients. In some cases, they're kind of hard to collect. But there is a lot of art I found in, just even how different people will use the ingredients and what they interpret, and, their knowledge of like the hosting and domain ecosystem to try to make that more accurate.
Now, beyond the security tester, the pen tester mindset, what are some other reasonings that companies are utilizing this data for? Maybe some less common ones that our listeners would not be familiar with.
So one of the ones that surprised me the most was... using the WHOIS data to track entrepreneurship trends, right? I think in many cases, people are registering their domain names way before they even think about like getting a DBA or getting their LLC together.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it's not a terrible thing considering you have to wait a while for your domain to even, get meaningful traffic anyway.
Right.
Right.
But usually when they have an idea, the first place to go is buy that domain, right?
Yeah. So, it's funny. We've worked with everything from domain registrars, where we have a lot of bidirectional relationships with these registrars that are using the WHOIS data for their own kind of research and purposes in that way. A lot of times to kind of track, hey, like not just what domains exist out there, but, what domains and trends are popping up across different top-level domains in terms of like what names are being popular, if there's like a particular verbs or trends or something like that. There's a big industry for just like deciding which domain names are valuable for what.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then, we've also helped other folks from like even the investment community who want to use like WHOIS data, hosting data, global DNS data to get a sense of, in terms of like market performance, how does like Google versus Cloudflare versus Amazon, how do they do at the macro scale, right? If you can see, all the IPs they own and the domains on them, you can almost kind of discern like the population or how popular certain tools are or are becoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And You mentioned something earlier that, it's not just the WHOIS data anymore. You got to take some other data points and things like that. And you guys are starting to do some pretty cool work with some passive DNS and a bunch of other data sets. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. We've been doing kind of dipping our toes into passive DNS for at least like 10 years now or so, and have really kind of shorn up those efforts. Right. So because a lot of, I think, the vulnerability scanning tools rely on us to find domains, right, it's been natural for us to go to the left of that and try to find subdomains.
Yeah.
Well, there's no great repository for all the subdomains that exist, right? There's certificate transparency logs. Maybe you have some kind of network telemetry of your own that your customers are sharing with you, and you can find new names there. But even still, there's not like a single real repository of all the subdomains that exist. You're probably not going to get access to like your customers' like zone files in most cases, for instance.
Right.
So then it becomes who can find, who can find out of this whole community of who we have trying to protect people, who can kind of scan all the domains and try to find their subdomains and see, are they really there, or are they like maybe a wildcard configuration that would have resolved anything?
Yeah.
Right. So again, a lot of art comes into that.
How do you collect some of that passive DNS data?
Well, I happily steward, I'll say, our internet abuse signal collective. So, we've partnered already with about 700 different cybersecurity vendors who make different tooling, from attack surface to network security to endpoint things to mobile security. Folks who see a lot of traffic.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And a lot of those folks have relied on us already for a long time in like, well, what domains exist? So we've kind of like built a lot of relationships over the years to get access to a lot more of that passive DNS telemetry, in some cases more of their traffic details and kind of rich kind of many petabytes of raw data. And then we learn from that. And we, when we find new subdomains and things like that, we know, hey, we've never seen that one before. Let's just write that down. The first time I saw that was at this point in time.
Yeah.
And, we probably do that billions of times a month without like where most of those aren't even useful for people. But,
you never know, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But it's kind of the same thought of like, who would ever thought that the WHOIS historical data would have been so beneficial right now to find additional stuff, right? When you do the reverse stuff, because it was registered, they put an email address in, or at one point they had a certain configuration, you stored that. So you just wrote down that record and you store that, right? Exactly. And then like fast forward to today, everything's private, but if you go back in the historical record, you can glean some additional information, which helps you, right? So I guess it makes sense that you're writing everything down, right?
Yeah, that's what we're really obsessed with in every direction, right? From domains, what exists and who registered them and what the configurations are, to their DNS records, to the IP addresses and who owns those, right? So we really index a ton of data. Right. And, if it's a needle in the haystack game, we're kind of a haystack factory.
Yeah. Do you have challenges with storing that much data?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sifting through all that?
Yeah. We co-locate, thankfully. We have a very, very, very good relationship with our providers and backups and everything. I think if we have built this in some of the ways that newer companies build and, they don't kind of run their own metal, right, things would be exponentially more expensive. I don't even know this would work.
Right. Yeah. So what's the origin story behind WhoisXML?
Origin story. Jonathan Zhang. Jonathan Zhang is our CEO and founder. He still works with us. He, around 2009, he was doing a project at NASA for their JPL labs.
Okay.
Right? And for one reason or another, he needed kind of like a local WHOIS database at that time in order to accomplish his, I think, like cybersecurity, network security project there. I never found the full details of that, right? Some confidential stuff and stuff. But I know that he tried to reach out to a number of providers, but he didn't really get like strong support or, kind of pricing that was compatible with his reality. Right. So we kind of just like, well, I'll write my own parser. And then that ended up actually working pretty well. He put a website up and had a little bit of like SEO marketing. And then that started to bring in a lot of traffic. And then at a certain point, he published almost like an unlimited WHOIS subscription where, you could hit us as hard as you want, as often as you want. And that was cool until like a really big ISP came in and then took us for our word on it. And like, okay, maybe not totally unlimited, but,
unlimited with rate limited.
But, what we were finding is in many cases, people were used to having to kind of build those lookups themselves. And the fact that it was still kind of free text and not very structured, the parsing of it, the collection of it became something where people want to build beautiful attack surface management tools. They want to build things that help you identify where you have like weak spots fast. They don't really have 5 years to go and crawl the WHOIS system and then figure out how it behaves and then have like a full staff of engineers just like going and fixing the many ways that the data gets corrupted and stuff like that.
And that structured output was a real problem, right? Because you want to parse structured output to get the things that you want out of it, but there really wasn't much structure
the
there.
date fields alone.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, the many different time zones and ways to put a date, right? It's very, very chaotic in the natural kind of WHOIS world.
So I'm guessing the first format was XML?
You would guess, yeah. And can you guess how we used to deploy it at first?
Yeah.
XML at first, and then it became JSON. And these days we do a lot of actually like dumping data for like local download use in CSV and JSON.
Okay, what do you mean by that dumping data though? Like, is that structured in a certain format, or
structured in a CSV format?
Okay.
Like imagine all the records you get in a normal WHOIS query, but structured, parsed. So you see when we collect the record, the official information, all of that stuff, right? But rather than having to go and do hundreds of millions of WHOIS queries for yourself, right? Being able to go and just pull in, or if you will, almost like download Google Maps. Right. And then have that locally, right? If you have that on your own servers, you can do as many lookups as you need to, right? And we've gotten a lot of very positive encouragement from our buddies in like the registrar communities and things like that, because I think by doing that, I think we've offloaded a lot of the kind of pressure on the natural WHOIS servers.
Yeah.
Right. For some of the big organizations who, they're not, in many cases, not even interested in the contact data. They just need to figure out the domain age of everything, but like at billions of times a day. It's not a thing you can approach with any API.
Yeah.
Right. So, if they want to build sophisticated machine learning to find domains that actor groups have spun up that are otherwise hard to connect, or on the protector side, right, spin up machine learning to go and then kind of figure out at scale, hey, maybe we can figure out automatically, when my customers make new domains or when their domains drop or what have you. Right, rather than having to go and do a tremendous amount of WHOIS queries and burden really the systems of these registrars, we provide data licenses. Not everyone can get them; they have to be in approved use cases. So all partners the data comes from are happy and everything is above board. But at this point, that's maybe 700 different cybersecurity products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're mostly getting the data dump from you guys just so they don't have to do query after query, or they're analyzing the data in some unique fashion.
Yeah, sometimes it's both. Sometimes, because even we can only see so much. So, we have a lot of partnerships with folks where, generally speaking, they'll check our offline feeds first and see if it's there. And if it's not there, then they'll do a live WHOIS lookup.
Oh, okay. Listen, if you made it this far, I'm just going to ask you for one favor. Most of you listening right now haven't subscribed. Go ahead, feed that algorithm, and support us by clicking subscribe. Doing so allows me to bring you great content and allows us to bring more exceptional guests onto the podcast. Go ahead, hit subscribe. I appreciate it. Do you ever get conflicting information in WHOIS and have to deal with that, right?
What's funny is yes, but statistically not as much. We're going to see that more as RDAP, Registration Data Access Protocol, gets more fleshed out and adopted. We are happy with that because at least a lot of the parsing is taken care of more. It's a little bit of a better format.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe for our listeners that don't know what RDAP is, could you explain the problem that that's solving?
Yeah, so ever since it was made, right, WHOIS has been kind of a free text protocol, and also didn't have a lot of authentication for like who is able to run queries, right? Pretty much any machine would be able to run a WHOIS query. ICANN, since really GDPR came around, right, 2018, and before that, has put a lot of work and thought and tremendous amount of like consensus building around how should registration data be accessible to legitimate requests. Oftentimes, that's like law enforcement trying to reveal who's maybe doing some illegal things with the domain, for instance, right? So I can put some specs together for the registration data access protocol. It's kind of like what should be seen as kind of like the next version of WHOIS. We've already adapted to the RDAP demands, everything, and they're kind of watching the adoption come along. Really, functionally, not much changes for our users at the end of the day. Age is still very reliable, right? We're seeing some differences in sometimes WHOIS has richer contact data than RDAP, sometimes vice versa. But yeah, it seems like the core ingredients of figuring out what names exist, how long they've been around, and whatever registrant data is, explicitly meant to be public.
Yeah.
Really, none of that really seems to be going away. I think everyone's just trying to mature to kind of new systems, but especially in the registrar and hosting world, some of these are small companies, and it may take a very long time, for them to kind of have compatible things.
Do you have a success story from like a customer that's used your data, your services in a very interesting way, or maybe a good story of how they can benefit from using your data?
Yeah. So one of the companies that we partnered with, who's done a very, very good job in brand protection, is Doppel.
Okay.
Right? They use AI. They do a lot of deepfake detection. They do a lot of really cool stuff. But we've worked with them since at least a couple of years ago now, when their product was a little bit at an earlier stage. And we became kind of a nice bedrock for them to discover phishing domains that are targeting their customers. We like to think of it as real time, but probably in some cases within like hours or minutes even of a domain being registered. So, they're running on our WHOIS scan data, and that helps them find a lot of apex domains, we like to call it, that are targeting their customers. And then also using our DNS data for the same thing at the subdomain level. Right. So really overnight, they were able to start seeing, millions of new events a day, and then train and do a lot of the beautiful art and science that they do on that side to be very precise about, hey, this was registered very recently, right? It targets your brand name, right? We looked, and then we even found like credential harvesting pages and stuff like that. So, they do a tremendous job helping their customers like take down those websites, get them taken down either by the registrar, hosting, that sort of thing.
Nice. That's an awesome success story.
Yeah.
How is the anonymous and private registration data affecting the WHOIS records and moving forward?
It has affected it brutally as early as 2018. I think in 2018 we saw it was like 80 or 90% of domains went to non-public.
And that's because when you register a domain, everyone's defaulting to, hey, we're giving away the private registration for free.
Oh, exactly.
You should do this.
Yeah. And then also whole countries, top-level domains, started restricting that more, at the query level. So even if, you were to look at an entire country's domain, sometimes you might not find almost any contact details anymore, right? Because they may have decided, okay, we're just not publishing that anymore, unless maybe like a registrant is like forcing like, hey, make sure people see our thing. Right?
That's crazy to hear that even as a TLD that's happening.
Oh, yeah.
You'd want to think you'd want to know maybe what TLD that country, you'd want to see that registration information.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah, and it's always been notoriously hard to see like domains popping up in some of those areas which are not so easy to see, right? But those private registrations have also kind of come back a little bit, not dramatically, but we've noticed a lot of Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 big companies start to realize like, oh, we do want people to know what our domain is, right? So they've moved more towards that. And I think everyone on the protector side have moved more towards, again, clues from SSL, right? The IP ranges that they're sitting on, the DNS infrastructure, and they're having to do, in some cases, very complicated data science to summarize and try to figure out mathematically how closely things are related.
Do you have any groundbreaking research or anything you can talk about that you're doing?
Yeah, I think I could share some things. So particularly on the DNS side, we've really been honing in on ways to figure out not just what exists, but like what's real. Right. I think for a long time, there's been problems in passive DNS where there's been a lot of cases where people thought assets existed, but it's just because, let's say, maybe the owner of that website or their domain set it up where anything would resolve, like a wildcard subdomain would resolve,
Yeah.
right? So because of that, I think there's all kinds of different scanners and security companies and things like that that have basically, queried to see if things exist and then gotten an answer and then just assumed because there was a resolution, it really does exist.
Okay.
When, in some cases you'll find some sources will say millions of subdomains exist for one particular apex domain, but when you look and you see whether they're really there, you're like, oh, almost none of this is there. There's maybe a couple hundred, if not dozens of subdomains that are actually there. So there's kind of a lot around determining whether or not apex domains or even their subdomains have wildcards configured. And that has caused us to do a tremendous amount more partnerships and research and queries to figure that out at scale across all the domains and subdomains that we're aware of. What is really real? And, we started off initially with kind of like our all-time past few years corpus of all the subdomains that we've seen, which is over 100 billion.
Oh, wow.
Subdomains, right? And then when we started checking whether or not they were really there, we found that 90% were not, and probably were never there. So there's kind of like this, I don't know, I've heard a lot of terms for it, like ghost DNS queries, wildcards, things like that. But there's almost like all of this dirty graffiti out there in the internet and passive DNS databases where people think that something exists. And it's tough because, when a tool maker says that something exists and then a user's in there and they check and, it's like a false positive, it's frustrating, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I imagine you have to, just because you see that a DNS query is made out, that it gets a response, you have to probably go out and say, is that domain set up as almost a wildcard, right?
Right.
Or is there a wildcard there that essentially is just keep giving a response? Or you probably look at the responses, and say, of all these responses, do they all share the same record? So maybe that's the indicator that there is a wildcard. Like, is that the extra work you have to do?
There's a number of things. Also, in some cases, it can go as far as like even port scanning to see if there's ports open.
Okay.
Right. So depending on, again, your artful approach to it.
Yeah.
There are some methods that are a little bit more low friction that you can go and figure out, but maybe they may miss certain things. So in many cases, it's an aggregate of a handful of methods, maybe a few methods, maybe a couple dozen, gone and then all done, studied together and normalized, right? But for us, that was a big thing we did this year was go and kind of eliminate like what isn't actually real. And then it was very eye-opening for us because we really thought that a lot of this was really there, and we find almost none of it has ever really existed.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you think is causing all that traffic to go out? That is providing these ghost records, essentially?
Well, there's everything from like universities who go and then kind of enumerate domains and subdomains and try to see like, do certain things exist for like science purposes?
Okay.
There's big companies like in the same way that like Shodan scans the IP space. There's a lot of companies that are kind
Guys
of
like us that are,
exactly.
Brute forcing,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if you think about like, let's say one target organization, like a big bank, for example, right? They may have done POCs with a dozen attack service providers, a couple dozen. A lot of those are, generally speaking, going to enumerate subdomains, right? And in many cases, unfortunately, even for them, right? They may do millions of queries and then realize, oh, almost all of these resolved. And they start looking and like, oh, actually, no. And it becomes a bigger mess now because then you're like, all right, what's real, what's not?
Yes.
Right? So we've been doing a lot of work also with our Signal Coalition to also get access to more of the telemetry and traffic data and then apply some kind of fun machine learning and stuff like that to it, and then try to find more useful detection signals. So that way, like at scale, we can see, okay, is it real? Is it real? And does it see traffic? And also like how much traffic?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I can really relate to this problem though, because our ASM solution, we have to make sure we record the wildcard in it, and then we're going to brute force, all these subdomains and try to identify something that does not equal that wildcard, right?
Yeah.
Apologies if we're polluting your passive DNS system fashion, but these are really hard problems that you guys are solving. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, the scale at the billions a day. And one of my favorite things about it is, if I ever have an idea of like, oh, I wonder if this happens, like in billions of records, even if it's a 1 in a million thing, that's like 1,000 times that it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, thanks for coming on the show. If anyone wants to follow the work that you're doing or connect with you, how could they do so?
Hit me up on LinkedIn, contact us to WhoisXML API, very easy to reach.
Yeah. Alex, thanks for coming on the show. If you've made it this far, do me a favor and check out what we do at Sprocket Security. If you're ever in need of a penetration test and you want that hybrid scalable approach, the always testing, always on, not this fake click a button, do a pen test 2 weeks and then do that 5 times a year. No, I mean always on, always testing, latest bleeding edge threat that comes out there, latest exploit, phishing, all the way to, defense evading, covert operations, whatever type of pen test you need. We'll do it as frequently as possible, and we'll also provide a platform for us to interact together. I've devoted the last 5 years of my life to building penetration testing and innovating upon it and changing it so you can actually do security testing, proactive security testing, in a much better way. Give it a shot. Check us out, www.sprocketsecurity.com.